Welcome in, college hoop diehards. This is the Three Man Weave podcast coming live on Hump Day via the Zoom machine, YouTube, Twitter. Check us out there. But if you listen to us on the typical recorded fashion, well, thank you for joining us. Any method, Kai, we accept all listeners of any forms. I am Matthew Cox, running host, and I thank you for filling in my stead last weekend. How are you, Mr. McKeon? Jim, I'll get to you in a second, but I want to get to Kai first here.
Well, gosh, Matt, I'm good. I'm more wondering how you are, Mr. Hamptons, Mr. Fancy Guy, coming back from a wedding in such an incredible place. Hey, don't bury the lead either. Who did you see, man? What band played at that wedding?
Guster, I'm gonna write you a letter.
Guster,
and
unbelievable.
Shout out to Norlander for the Guster love.
I didn't tweet at him. I should have done that. I certainly missed some content opportunity. I apologize in that regard. But there's like an after party after the main DJ set, and then there was this separate little room, and then they pulled the curtain, and it was Guster. And it was like, holy crap. It was weird though, because there's some of us that were starting rumors of like who the special guest could be, Jim, and we were sort of throwing in like Billy Joel and like, elite. Yeah. So I kind of felt like we actually did Guster a disservice. Like everyone was not as excited for Guster because of the bar that people were starting to set. I guess when you heard $1 billion wedding fund, you probably thought like Foo Fighters or like all the way A-list of expensive, but still awesome. I love Guster. So for those who were disappointed at the wedding, shame on you. Great band.
Kai, I've never been to a wedding where there was a secret special guest that there was even conjecture about. So Matt's already got a one-up on us. Kai, you buried a little lead too. You saw a college hoop celebrity at the bar this weekend. Why don't you share that with the people?
I saw a celebrity.
Sorry. You sure did. You sent me a picture of him.
Oh, you know what I did? I saw a guy at the bar that I was at, and I said to Jim and Matt, I know this guy is a college basketball player. Like I'm 99% sure he's 6'10". Well, it's Killian Tilly. Jim recognized immediately. We made eye contact several times. I almost thought like, wait, does Killian Tilly know who I am? But no, not at all. Good to see him. Yes. Matt Guster, like 40 to 75,000 person Googling to get them at your wedding. Impressive.
Hey, okay, but attainable.
That's a cheapo billionaire. Come on.
Yeah,
ante up. It's once in your life.
Yeah,
it's not even six figures to get him there, and you've got
incredible band.
3 commas. It's ridiculous.
It was very awkward explaining who Guster was to people there who didn't know who Guster was. It's like, this is a really huge band. And they're probably like, well, if they're that big, why haven't I heard of them? It's like, they're kind of like at a huge in a culty way, I would say, right? I don't know. Like a Dave Matthews sort of popular. Not that popular, but like
a movie that's a cult classic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, Kai, you should have talked to Killian Tilly about blazing the way for French players, showing Victor Wembanyama how it's done. That's been his idol his whole career, I'm sure.
Hey, Killian, Kai from Three Man Weave. You don't know who I am, but etc. Elevator pitch, Matthew. Okay. Hey, we can go on with the show now. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the show consists of a continuation of our off-season series, doing a recap of all of the major conferences, what we learned, what we saw, what we're looking forward to next year. Today's the Pac-12. Our favorite conference, Jim? Question mark?
What?
Maybe,
No.
Possibly. No. Okay. I tried to kind of hype it up there at the onset, but no, I think we're just going to call it like it is. We'll talk about some of the Pac-12 stuff going on behind the scenes, sort of the fissures that are forming. Obviously, USC, UCLA will no longer be a part of this podcast next year. And then some other realignment stuff. But in general, shouts to the 2 to 3 people out there who do like the Pac-12, because we do hold you very highly in our hearts. And we're not going to, chastise you for your West Coast brethren who just tend to care about other things, which is understandable given where you live, whatever.
I miss their time zone. I kind of miss their time zone.
Yeah.
Being out in Vegas, having lived there, just early weekends, get sports rolling, even weekdays. I want to get them going, Matthew.
Yeah, it is weird. March Madness always is kind of a shocker. It's 9:15 and there's actual games. I'm supposed to be drinking at like 9:15 for a March Madness weekend game. It's just odd. So yeah, fun times out there on the West Coast. But yeah, that's the gist of today's show. Self-promotion, Jay Pitty, Joe Paskov, the DJ, the mastermind behind the ones and twos of this great podcast. Do follow him if you can. Follow us if you can on Twitter. That's at 3MW_CBB and Instagram. Same handle applies. Please subscribe to our podcast. That's on Amazon, Spotify, iTunes, among other platforms, where we highly encourage and borderline bribe you to leave reviews of the 5-star variety, Kai. Yes. And such pressure has paid off, has it not?
Yes, if you're new to the show, please leave us reviews on Apple iTunes, and we will read said reviews on our broadcast at the beginning of our show. Ask us questions, whatnot. We have 4 today. So a lot of reviews today after 0 last week. Fantastic. They come in bunches. The updates do nothing is the guy who wrote this review. Best college basketball pod in the land. This is the best college basketball pod out there. The guys know their stuff, et cetera, et cetera. Great from both an entertainment and knowledge perspective. My excitement as a Creighton fan has ramped up for this upcoming year with the returns of Kalkbrenner and Alexander. Please tell me why Ashworth will be better than Nembhard, Trout will be better than Kaluma, and why Jim will pick this team to finish last in the Big East for the second year in a row. Love the pod. Looking forward to another great year. Jim, your response.
We talked about it on the Big East season recap, and I am ready to do it, Matthew. I had to let the take get inside of me before I really put it out there, but I think this year's Creighton's gonna be better than last year's. I just love the fit of Ashworth, giving them more consistent perimeter spacing. They've got plenty of playmaking back with Alexander and Shireman to help Ashworth in that regard. You've got your monster in the paint to make you sustainable as your rim dominance on both ends. And Kaluma was just this weird kind of streaky guy. I don't know if Lawson and Trout can really fill that 4 spot and be stars, but I like the mesh, Matthew. I'm going to say it. Creighton better this year than last year.
I agree. Kai, no.
No, I don't like him better than last year. No.
Yeah, Ashworth's my guy. So
We'll be down. Wait, do I? I might have. Yeah. I'm probably going back on what I said in the Big East preview.
I was a little bummed trying to
They're around
hype
the
up
same.
Ashworth. I was trying to hype up Ashworth to all the Mizzou folks out there in the tournament, and then he kind of stunk. So it was sort of a tough sell.
We
for me
appreciated
there,
that,
but he's
though.
good.
Was,
yeah, I did.
Thank you
for Mizzou
your
fans.
ice cold round 1 shooting.
Yeah, the Ashman can play. He can hoop.
Next review, Tournament Hopeful. Awesome podcast. Best college basketball podcast around. Fantastic. Good. As a lifelong Flyer fan, I want your take on how good Dayton could be this year now that Deron Holmes has decided to come back for his junior season. Also, UD Arena, one of the best places in the country to watch a basketball game. Make sure you guys come catch a game next season. I would actually very much like to go to a Dayton basketball game. I also hear it's a great place to watch. Jim, I think Dayton's going to be pretty darn good once again this season.
Yeah, they're one of 5 contenders to win the league, probably, or maybe you could probably widen it than that. A10 doesn't look like it's going to be a whole lot better than last year. So if they get a healthy Malachi Smith, I don't see why not Dayton can't top that league and be the representative in the tournament. Totally agree on UD Arena. The Flyer fans were incredible in Maui the year I was there. My brother's best friend just moved to Dayton, so got a little bit of an excuse to go stop by and hang with him if I make it to the arena. Matt, I would love to see a game there.
Everything about Dayton's cool. Their mascot, the color scheme, the logo, fight song, just the arena. It's just all awesome. It's just like one of those mid-major programs. Not, VCU is up there, but Dayton has kind of a cooler cachet for me. I'm just like mid-major teams I like and will always root for. Wichita's in that group too.
Cue slew diehard Dan Schmidt hearing that and getting angry at us saying everything about Dayton is cool.
Just
He'll never let us
lighting a gasoline lit rope to the half of the Arch Bear rivalry. I apologize, Slew fans.
Next review comes from All About Big Butts 69420. That's it's fantastic username.
Motto of this podcast, right?
Love the pod. We should actually replace our tagline with that. Favorite college basketball pod out there. Really happy I found this last season. 2 questions. Number 1, I've gone to 1 game at Cameron Indoor. That was the Stephen F. Austin game in 2019. I've gone to 1 Colonial Life Arena game, that's South Carolina, the Devin Downey game against Kentucky in 2010. Which blue blood should I attempt to send to the netherworld this upcoming season by attending a game of theirs, and what type of game? Jim, obviously the answer is Kansas. Go to a Fog Allen and go to a KU game.
Go ruin Kansas. They play Eastern Illinois at home this year. Eastern Illinois, the 32-point dog winners at Iowa.
Giant killers. That's right. Giant killers.
I say go see my parents' alma mater, EIU, take down the Jayhawks next year. That is my specific choice for this question.
Is Mizzou at KU next year? Or KU's at Mizzou?
No, I think it's at KU. We got stomped at home this year.
Yeah, remember they came into your gym and completely
when we were undefeated and had so much hype.
Yeah, that's right. Okay,
non-competitive basketball.
His second comment here: thoughts on the Cornell Big Red. His Cornell Big Red. Huge fan of our assistant coach, John Jacques. John Jacques. He also says, "Note: I am not John Jacques, nor related to him." We love Cornell. I know Matt. Really, we were all pretty in on this.
Yeah.
I'm going to give most credit to Matt being like first to Cornell last season. Matthew.
I think I was first to fall back in love. We kind of fell in love with him the year before. And then Earl just did it again and just did it better last season. Yeah, it's just a fun team to watch. It's the most like every shot's the most insanely open three or acrobatic circus layup off a backdoor cut. And there's like nothing in between. And the pressure is just fun. And it's just a cool team. Just a fun team.
I wish they were better in league play. 7-7 each of the last 2 years. They haven't been able to make any headway in the Ivy tournament, but just reading about Jean-Jacques reminded me he was on the Cornell team that beat Wisconsin in a 5-12 game way back in the day, 2010. So thank you for that reminder back when I was a huge Badger fan.
And finally, Pikes Peak Smitty, the good, the bad, and the ugly. New listener, fantastic podcast. Fantastic. Thank you for listening for the very first time. The good, great knowledge, fun to talk college basketball year round. The bad, ranking Purdue number 1.
Ooh, Kai, shady you.
I know. That was me. He said all they need to do is lose to a 14 seed next year to complete the 13, 14, 15 streak. We've said it a million times. The NCAA tournament is a tough way to judge programs, especially the following season. Purdue is a 1 seed. I think ranking number 1 next year is pretty defendable. The ugly, saying Mizzou, he says misery, is one of the best programs in the country.
Oh, good.
Please review the Final Four appearances the past century. Jim, they've made zero. They've made zero final. You didn't have to say century. They've made 0 Final Fours ever.
Yeah, they are not one of the best programs in the country. I feel like I remember when that slipped out of your mouth, Kai, and I was like, should we correct that? Nah, it's fine. They know we're biased and gonna beat the drum for our Tigers. They are not quite that good, unfortunately. But you want to throw some facts, don't you?
Okay, they're not okay. Maybe not one of the best. I would say they're one of the most underrated programs in the country. And that has a lot to do with the Kim Anderson, Frank Haith debacle that sent the program back a million years into the Stone Age.
Yeah. People think they're like Cal or they're like BC or something. They're not Boston College.
Mizzou is 42nd all time in NCAA tournament wins. They're 33rd all time in appearances. They're upper tier if you want to tier it out like that sort of a
shout out Norm Stewart. Thank you for all of
Norm
that.
Stewart. Okay. Wow. Long review, long intro section as well, Matthew. Back to you.
Yeah. Personal corner for us. We just went over my association with the bourgeoisie, the elites of this country in the Hamptons. I don't know. Anything else going on in your guys' life? Mid-June?
Nope. Let's round it up.
Let's round it up.
Hey, it's Roots Roundup hosted by Kai. Wow. What a change up here. That's right. Jim didn't want to do it today. He's wearing a bucket hat. He's in his little corner over there in the Zoom screen. Let's start with coaching news here. Surprising, Ron Sanchez has left Charlotte, the former head coach. He was there for a few years. I want to say 4 off the top of my head, maybe longer, to become the associate head coach at Virginia, the school he came from when he took the Charlotte job. Weird timing. Jim, go to you first here. It's June 7th. They're going to do a national search. So this isn't going to be a quick promotion, at least on the onset here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought they would go the Quinnipiac route when Baker Dunleavy left, and they just immediately promoted internally, even though we kind of slammed that hire. Tom Pecora, I don't know who Sanchez's lead assistant would have been that they went there. But yeah, just shocking that he's leaving at this point and going back to Virginia. I mean, that part makes sense. And hey, look what Richie McKay did when he went back home to Virginia and then left again and suddenly was brilliant and turned Liberty into a powerhouse. So maybe Sanchez will have a second life as a head coach sometime. But yeah, I mean, a lot of interesting names thrown around. I think Andrew Slater had a good tweet about like guys with Carolina ties, Bart Lundy or Mike Morrell from Asheville. Some of those guys are potential candidates there. But Matt, yeah, rather shocking. And I saw Charlotte called a sleeping giant by a couple people just because of the pedigree and the where it's at. And I could see that. They're going up to the American this year, conference-wise, so that's part of it.
Yeah, and the names that have been attached to the job in the early rumor mill are pretty dang good options. To name a few, Josh Schertz, Indiana State, Bart Lundy, Milwaukee, Jordan Mincy, Jacksonville, Bob Ritchie, Furman Kai, Mr. Siddle from UNC Wilmington as well. Just a tough time to take a job. Like, I feel like if you're a coach who wants to take this job at this point, you missed out on some pretty, precious recruiting cycle, and you're already kind of into the mid point of the off season. That's like, if you want to kind of sell a 3-year, 4-year plan, you basically need like a super patient AD that'll kind of give you this year as a grace period, given the time you'd probably start.
Yeah, I think it was John Fendler that tweeted something like, if it was Morrell or Lundy or Siddle, it would be like the most extreme stylistic shift from Sanchez and they have like very limited
Yeah.
time to implement it. So that could be shaky for the first year, but at least a long-term hire that would make
Charlotte
sense.
played slower than Virginia last year. Charlotte Sanchez outdid his old mentor Kai in terms of methodical, snail-paced basketball on offense last season.
This is kind of a scumbag move. Yeah, as a head coach, you decide to leave your post after the transfer.
Do we know the reason? Do we know the reason?
He says he just wanted to go back to Virginia.
Tough time.
It could
tough
be
time.
part of the new assistant coach allotment. Every team, right, is getting 2 more assistant coaches as of July 1st. However, he had a head coaching job. Who knows why he did it? But come on, you had to know this is kind of in your realm of possibilities before your undergrad guys could transfer out of the program. I think it's just kind of a scummy thing to do. No one ever thinks of the players, guys. They never do. Think of the children.
Think of the children.
Think of the children. Shaka Smart extended through 29-30. Good move, Marquette. He's very much at home in Milwaukee. In recruiting news, Simeon Welcher has left UNC. He's a top 60, top 70, top 35 guy, I want to say. He's pretty up there.
Yep.
He left UNC. Armando Baycott had a tweet that said, running from the grind or something like that. Hilarious, Jim, as we referenced.
Yeah, you sat out the NIT last year. What kind of grind are you running from? That was so lame that you're calling out a guy 5 years younger than you because he wants to play somewhere else when you're going to start next to 2 different transfers. Is Harrison Ingram running from the grind because he came to play with you? Is Cormac Ryan running from the grind because he switched ACC schools? That's selective 23-year-old bias out of Baycott.
It's also pretty, by the way, you're 23. You're supposed to be a mature guy and you're subtweeting guys in social media. No wonder why UNC was the way it was last season. If that's the type of leadership, on this team with Hubert Davis and Baycott apparently not afraid to call people out publicly, it's not a surprise why they're struggling right now. Matt, Wilcher, teammate of Indiana recruit Mbako. Interesting. People are speculating he might go to IU, but who knows?
Yeah, I haven't heard like a ton of momentum there. I'm surprised I haven't heard more. I think it's like a real possibility. I just thought I would see it all over Twitter and then my IU back channels would be exploding with notifications, but not had been the case. So we will see.
I felt like Mbako was really kind of under the radar too. It was like, oh, he's going to St. John's. Everybody knows it. Or maybe Louisville. And then suddenly it was Indiana. And so I think I've seen St. John's mentioned for Wilcher too. I think Pat just said it in the chat too. And, suddenly we could get the surprise of him appearing at IU. We'll see.
Deaton Thomas, a 5-star point guard recruit in the class of 2024, has reclassed to 2023. He's going to UNLV. Huge for UNLV to get this caliber of a recruit once again. It's back since the early 90s when they were a legit powerhouse.
He's a legacy. I think his dad played there.
Actually, I think his dad did play during that time period as well. We have mixed feelings about point guard reclasses. They have not tended to work out recently. Jim?
I'll say I don't have mixed feelings. I think I have strong negative feelings.
Yeah.
They're all underperforming. I think last year Proctor was supposed to be the guy that broke the mold because he was a pro previous to it. Even he had a long adaptation period, Matthew, where he didn't really look like himself for a while. He had like a 90 O rating for 2.5 months of the season.
Mm-hmm.
It's just hard to do for those guys that are not physically developed. It's just tough, especially at that level of college basketball.
I think it's even hard for anybody, especially point guards. I would agree. And track record's not good. Heck, UNC, Elliot Cadeau, he's doing the exact same thing. And
UNC fans are like, oh, we got this 5-star, slot him in the lineup. I'm like, yep. But remember when Duke thought they were going to be able to do that, or even Kentucky with Higgins, or et cetera, go down the line. Ask you.
I don't know, man. We'll see how it works out. 2024 4-star point guard Daniel Freitag. That means Friday in German for all you scholars out there. He's going to Wisconsin, top 70 recruit. So way to go, Greg Gard. Momentum.
Okay, I didn't know that about German. There's a former Brown player named Dan Friday.
Oh, yes.
This is the German version of him.
Freitag. Yes. In transfer news, 2 big dominoes left, guys, in the transfer portal. Arthur Kaluma, Grant Nelson. The third one just committed before this podcast. Olivier Kamwa from Tennessee is going to Michigan.
Or so he hopes.
Speculation is if he will get into the school, as it's famously hard to get in, apparently, as a transfer. We were hoping he would go to Baylor. That was heavily rumored. He's going to waste away at Michigan, Matthew. No offense to Michigan right now.
Yeah, Michigan's not like UNC like black hole of abyss of who the heck knows what's happening, what's going to happen. It's a little higher upside, I would say, but certainly, yeah, I kind of rolled my eyes at this personally. So
He's really good. I sung his praises last podcast. I'm going to raise Michigan. I haven't done the rating yet, but I will raise them for his transfer commit. But yeah,
Burnett, Doug McDaniel, Terrace Reed, Terrence.
It could be a good team. It could be a really good team.
Board, I guess.
I know it could be a really good team. I'm just so stained by last year.
Yeah,
just ruined.
Cam Spencer from Rutgers has chosen destination. He's going to UConn. Wow, that's a really good choice by him, Jim.
Huge. They hadn't done anything in the portal this year. After last year, so much of the success was they got 4 different guards from the portal, had a bunch of different player types that they could throw out there, and whoever's playing well, stick with them. I just love this because my biggest worry with UConn this year was they weren't going to have that gravitational shooting force that Jordan Hawkins was, that allowed the paint to be this area of dominance for Sonogo. He got to seal guys when people helped too far out on shooters. Now you can run Spencer in that role because he is just as good of a shooter as Hawkins, maybe not as good on the move, but he is a fantastic perimeter shooter, and I think that's going to help him big time.
Agreed. Connor Vanover, Oral Roberts, 7'5". He's going to Mizzou. Mizzou has landed their center. Matt.
Kai, we're one of the best programs in the country, Mizzou.
One of the best programs in the
country. Right now, we're in bias mode. We're talking about them now. We're bias mode.
Matt, what's your non-biased third-party opinion on Vanover?
I think Vanover is going to rock for Mizzou. I think this is like your most impactful pickup of the all. Which I guess isn't really saying a whole lot, but like I think this is kind of a massive get. And this is from someone who wants to throw shade at Kai for the whole Mizzou commentary and likes to throw cold water and any Mizzou hype that is unjustified. In this particular isolated beanstalk of a context, Jim, I think Vanover is going to rock for the Mizzou Tigers.
I sure hope so. Kai, objectively speaking here, Evan Miyakawa ranks Vanover 11th of all transfers in the portal this year. So that's objective. That's not biased Mizzou perspective. That is numbers speaking to you.
I'll take it. You're darn right. He's number 11. Let's see here. 2 St. John's guys have finally found their spots to go. David Jones, major name in the transfer portal, former DePaul guy as well, going to Memphis. It's a heck of a pickup for Penny Hardaway. Congrats on that one. And then Andre Curbelo, former Illinois, former Big Ten Sixth Man of the Year, former preseason All-American sophomore at Illinois, then transfer to St. John's, is going to Southern Miss. The Southern Miss Golden Eagles had a fantastic season last year. How will he perform in the Sun Belt, Matthew? All conference, player of the year?
I kind of think he's going to be nice. I'm in on a Bello bounce back. Yeah. No one saw Southern Miss coming last year, and they were just good. I kind of think Curbelo going to the little Puerto Rican pipeline that they have there. I forget the name of the assistant that Ladner brought on, like completely changed the direction of that program. He's going to be fired probably. They bring him in. They kind of get some selective recruiting, get some guys with some, Latin ties, and voila, they're just good. Pressure, whole scheme. I think he fits there. I'm backing on Bello, Jimbo.
I mean, he's going to be so good as a driver and like highlight reel passer at that level, but I just don't think his decision-making can be fixed. I think he will still be turnover prone. You talked about that pipeline, Matthew. They brought in Neftali Alvarez last year, and I know he dealt with injuries, but he was bad. Like 86 offensive rating.
Yeah.
Curbelo could be right around 90, 95 again because of the turnovers and the complete lack of a perimeter shot. So Kai, it's like you get some strengths with him, you get some negatives. At that level, it's worth the gamble though.
Yeah, if you're Southern Miss, you're ecstatic, I think. I mean, he's a point guard that can have success, I think, in the Sun Belt. So good get for them. Their roster is actually shaping up to be pretty nice as well, Matthew, in addition to just Curbelo.
As long as Crowley's there. I love Crowley.
Yeah, Crowley's a nice player.
Nice. All right. Speaking of nice, let's go to the Pac-12 section of the podcast, kicking it back to Matthew, little preview style, as we've been doing for the last couple of weeks.
The Pacific 12, the Pacific 10, the Pac-10, whatever we're going to call it. It's the Conference of Champions, though, in our hearts, Kai. Shout out to Bill Walton, Kai, we saw in person earlier this summer with his phenomenal speech. And shouts to his new documentary just came out recently on 33. Yeah, that's a free plug for ESPN, something I'll never do again. But there it is. The Conference of Champions, Jim. Will we see any champions from this league this year in terms of national caliber? Methinks not. No. And you just kind of look back at last year. It's such a top heavy league, right? That's kind of what this league's turned into. And for the health of the league long term, I think that's a bad thing. And it's kind of why the winds are blowing in a fragmentation direction, I would say.
Yeah, what last year, pretty clear the best team in this league was UCLA, especially at least until they got hurt. And coming into this year, maybe the best team is USC, and those are the two that are leaving. Like if you're top heavy and you're going to lose your top, that's a problem. Arizona isn't quite the same caliber this season with no Tubelis, and you're bringing in that gamble that is Caleb Love. Yeah, man, I don't love the top of the league this season, especially as compared to last year with UCLA and Arizona at the top.
Hi.
Yeah.
In terms of Pac-12, how much do you care about the realignment stuff with Colorado, Washington State? Have you followed this closely at all? Do you care about any of that as a backdrop to our college basketball 2024 season?
I'm just really annoyed with realignment. I hate it.
Yeah, I do too.
Unless it makes sense. Like San Diego State joining the Pac-12, sure. At least that's like geographically, reasonable. Colorado.
I remember when NJIT went from the ASUN to the America East, and it was like, hey, this makes sense.
That's good realignment. Colorado heavily rumored to go to the Big 12. So is UConn. Stop it. Money ruins everything. USC and UCLA to Big 10. They suck. That sucks. At least they're here this year. We can focus on this year.
Shouts to Jason Shear, who I think runs the Wildcat Authority. He was on Field 60, I think, last 2 weeks ago, last week. Gives you a kind of colorful comedic relief view of this very annoying topic. So, Jason, keep doing the work. I appreciate you making fun of the administrators who just continue to act clueless and operate as if they're the committee to do meetings at all times is what they should be called. They basically meet every day and they don't really do anything. All that aside, preseason intrigue heading into last year, Kai, as we look back, we kind of were all, I don't know, not selling Pac-12, but you thought there'd be 4 teams that get in. Jim thought 4. I thought 5, as I always see everything glass half full. And 4 got in, thanks to Mr. Bobby Hurley and his perpetual balancing act on the bubble, got in the playing game. In terms of
that, literally the
did.
preseason pod, I said,
you did.
First 4 Dayton, Bobby Hurley, that's where he's comfortable. So it's pretty funny that's where he
I wonder if the committee must be tired of oh, really? They're here again? It's so hard to actually make an objective assessment of where they should fall.
Yeah. The problem was I said he was comfortable there, and then I bet on Nevada in that game, and they absolutely nuked Nevada in that game.
Let's talk team by team. We'll start with one of the defectors, soon to be defectors in UCLA, Mr. McKeon. Mick Cronin, I think all things considered, has got it going. And I think we kind of maybe thought, would he fit there if we harken back 3-4 years ago? He's really got that thing in a good place. And we'll nitpick about maybe how the roster looks next year. What didn't quite go right on a title chase last year. But in general, I think as a UCLA fan, you feel really good about Mick Cronin at the helm, I think, long term.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. He's done great the last couple of years. I just worry about this coming season. The roster all of a sudden looks, as Pat said in the chat, meh. It looks incredibly meh. Looking back quickly to last year, we were all right to be pretty high on them. I think Jim and I were higher than Matthew, so good high five for both of us. But you look at the season, you got a Dembona, fantastic. But the backcourt is questionable. The depth is questionable. I don't know, Jim. There's not a whole lot to like here. I mean, UCLA is going to finish in the top 5 of this conference. I'm pretty confident about that. I'm not sure I can call them a top 25 team right now.
I don't think I would. Yeah, the backcourt is thin, questionable. Who's making plays? Who's going to be the adult in the room after you lose maybe the most adult of adults in the room, Tiger Campbell, just the truest floor general in the sense of the word. I mean, there's a chance that they give UConn at least a single-digit game if they're actually fully healthy. I think they beat Gonzaga if Clark and Bona play. Maybe they don't even get that 2 seed. There's a whole shift and butterfly effect of that. But I kind of thought they were the best team in the country when they were healthy. And then they lose Clark to the Achilles. Bona gets hurt down the stretch. Matt, you called that in preseason pod. You did say they were thin, and that was kind of the fatal flaw, and it turned out to be. But next year, they're thin and not that talented. Yep. So I'm concerned.
Yeah, same concern. It's just magnified for me. That's kind of the takeaway. It's kind of sort of the same. You can see the same area where the season would go off the rails again, but you don't have the talent and experience to underpin that as the foundation. I wrote down in my little notepad here, Cronin with young team. I don't, this could be you could see Cronin pulling the 2 strings of hair he has left on his shaved head right now by late October. So it just seems like it's a program that's not as committed to basketball, Jim. Like there's not like the money that's going into, I think, some of the NIL stuff that's going on behind the scenes. You're seeing it with like the lack of, premier talent that they've gotten. I mean, it's a lot of kind of 4-star guys. There's been no 5 stars, no marquee transfers. And I can't tell if that's more Cronin or that's just more, it's again, the basketball spending isn't actually up to snuff with the program pedigree, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and part of it is the Pac-12 doesn't make as much money, which is part of
the overall conference.
Thing, so they're struggling with that. But like you look at some of the names that Arizona has landed in the portal relative to UCLA only getting Lazar Stefanovic, who we like but don't love, and they're not getting 5-star recruits this year. I mean, you go back, Peyton Watson, Amari Bailey, Adem Bona, they had been getting 5-star freshmen, but not this time around. And to not fill in some of those blanks, especially in the backcourt with like experienced ball handlers, it is really weird and alarming to me. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Maybe it is funds, Matt, finances, but either way, next year looks like a down year in the Cronin era there.
I say that because I saw that there's a guy on Twitter who's doing a bunch of like budget school, Jim, basically swagger jacking your mojo, but doing it really, really well. I'm not going to lie.
More of a better visually presented way of doing it.
He's got my stupid corporate consultant-y cut to him. And I think UCLA was like the lowest in terms of percentage of athletic spend as a relative proportion of their overall school budget. So it's just like Arizona cares more when they're at the table about sports, I think, than UCLA for comparison base. Anyway, speaking of Arizona, let's talk the Wildcats, who had a very interesting offseason, kind of a delayed start to their offseason in the wake of last year, which was, I think overall, we had a pretty good prognostication of this team coming in. The Tommy Lloyd bar of success is pretty clearly one of the highest right now in the country, where he's at, where that program's at. What's your thoughts on what we saw last year and where they go next year?
Yeah, we nailed the preseason prognostications for them. We said they'd be around top 10, top 15.
Sharp.
They indeed were. We rightly said they'd finish above Oregon. Our friend Jeff Goodman had Oregon above Arizona in his Pac-12 preseason rankings in the Almanac. Good. More pat in the back for us. Awesome team. Tommy Lloyd, we love off the court, on the court. This season, it's going to be interesting. Again, they have these two kind of on the surface guards that you wouldn't think would get along too well on the same court, and Caleb Love and Jaden Bradley being from Alabama. But last year, Ramey and Keisha worked fine. I had doubts about Ramey, hand up, ended up being pretty good for them. I love Keisha Johnson. I love that Balo's back. Larson, Goodman sang his praises all last season. He could have a better year this year. He wasn't quite as good as Goodman thought he'd be last season, but I think they're still a very good team, Jim. I'd probably put them as the favorite in the Pac-12 for me.
I think I would too, which is wild for me to say about a Caleb Love team. I feel like I'm always lower and throwing digs at him, but this team is a great regular season juggernaut because they can wear you down. They play with a specific style that's a little bit hard to prepare for. They're up and down. They typically have 2 real bigs on the floor that can punish you inside. Not a lot of other teams can keep up with that. But they're almost like this inverse Purdue, Matthew. And we talked a little bit how postseason success is very predicated on being able to play different ways. And that was why we praised FAU on the last pod.
Right.
Arizona can really only play one way. If you slow them down, they get frustrated. That's exactly what Princeton did. It's kind of what TCU did in the game a year ago in the round of 32. And then like the opposite, Purdue can only play slow. Like you've got to be able to have a different way of style or be able to win different games. I don't know that Arizona can. That's my concern going forward for postseason success, but they're still going to be a Pac-12 juggernaut.
Yeah, right. It's sort of every scout in America will be copycatting that Princeton blueprint, right? Like just of how jarring that was in terms of success in selling Arizona's. It does feel like kind of the old UNC under Roy Williamson, where it is such a good regular season rinse wash game to game system, but then in the postseason, if you have a whole week to prepare for, you could kind of scheme against it.
It's Gonzaga, you can throw the shade at them. Of course, they've been to Final Fours and title games, but still,
there's some flaws there. A final thing I'll add is I was concerned last year about the Keisha, the Keisha Ramey thing. Kind of makes me feel better about Love because that wasn't really an issue last year. Right, the chemistry between those two didn't seem like it was a major issue, so it gives me optimistic vibes that Lloyd will get Love to fit in that system.
And last week we said Love to Arizona is probably best case scenario for him.
Yes.
Which program we would pick him to go to that he can succeed? It's probably Arizona.
I would agree. All right, we're going back to La La Land, Jim. We're talking USC fight on Andy Enfield, and as we've always called it, the Enfield zone, the Cooley zone, the Enfield zone. And Mr. Enfield found himself right back in the thick of that again last season after he blew the doors off Mr. Evan Mobley the year before. We were mostly correct about this team last year. It's just such a tough team to peg.
Well, we nailed this team last year.
Okay, no. I was a little more wrong than you guys were, I think. I think you guys had this one right. Jim, tell people why you're right and why I was wrong.
Well, the Enfield range is narrow. It is 45th to 55th. It is 10 spots in KenPom, and he's been there 6 of his last 8 years. He had one really good year, like you mentioned, with Mobley, and then one bad year where they finished 82nd. But 6 of the last 8 years between that same 10 seed range or 10 spot range, and then Kai, they're like 7 through 11 in the NCAA tournament bracket. That's pretty much where they land. That's where they were this year. They're going to win 20 games. Be talented.
Top 4 Pac-12, win 20 games. Yep.
It is definitely not a position you would complain about as a fan, that consistent performance. But oh boy, there's a circus coming to La La Land next year. The Bronny James circus, along with Isaiah Collier, the top 5 recruit. I think they're going to still win 20 games, be top 4 in the Pac-12. Maybe the ceiling's a little higher this time around. Kai, what do you think?
The roster is full of talent. I'll say that. I like DJ Rodman coming in. Iwuchukwu last year was a huge recruit that didn't play a whole lot. He's back.
Had the heart thing, so maybe fully healthy.
Right. Collier, I've not watched a whole lot of quite yet, but he's the number 1 recruit in the country. You have to assume he's going to be pretty good. I think Bronny James is really overrated. I think wherever you have USC, they will underachieve, Matt, from an analytics perspective next season.
I kind of disagree. I'm a little more in on USC than you guys are.
You were pro Enfield on the preseason pod too, and
I was.
Where'd he land?
Hey, Boogie Ellis, to Boogie Ellis' credit, he had a fantastic year. He made the 10-team first team all conference Pac-12, by far his best season in college, and he's I love Boogie. 24 years old.
Yeah, it was probably banking more on Iwuchukwu being like a, not Evan Mobley, but like a game-changing type of big guy. And he's really just an afterthought, and so it kind of left them a little bit barren. And I thought they were playing a lot better before some of those injuries hit about midway through conference play. I just think it's a team built on defense, and I like that's what Enfield's starting to do. After he didn't play defense the first few years, he kind of just relied on offensive talent. Now I think he's at least starting to build a steady defensive foundation. I think that bodes well for them going forward. While the talent may not pan out on an efficiency base, I do think it can guard. I think Bronny James will defend, and they got some size and some length. So we shall see. Yeah, Kai, I think if we ever go back to USC to cover a game there, you'll at least see more than 2 people in the stands with Bronny James on the floor.
Yeah. Sell. I'm selling. Sell.
All right. I'll hold / maybe a light buy. Let's go to the Pac Northwest, a team I think I'm fully selling on after buying every year on this team. Quack, quack. The Flying V, Jim. The formation. Has it been discombobulated? Dana Altman, thoughts on the Duckies?
Yeah, last year the thing was Altman talking about how his chemistry wasn't good in 21-22. He's like, oh, we've got that figured out this year. But then they did have some real injury concerns last year, guys in and out of the lineup, Cousinard, Bartholomew, Williams, Dante, like that took a toll on them. But even early in the year, they didn't look that good, never really able to get pieces to mesh. Next year's not going to have much shooting. But I do really like their freshman class incoming, especially Shellstad, the freshman point guard. He's small, so he's not probably going to be like a one and done type guy, but he is good, Kai. I'm a huge fan of his.
Yeah, I'm being very cautious here, but gosh dang it, if Altman doesn't pull me right back in on Oregon. And the injuries were real last year. They, like you said it, the entire season they were dealing with stuff.
This feels like the kind of team that Matt would excuse. Be like, oh, injuries. Yeah, it's just injuries.
I think Bartholomew is good. You have 2 really old wings in Cousinard and Okendo. Okendo, not from a winning program. That's kind of a thing I look at, but he is a very talented player. You bring in Evans, a 5-star recruit in the front court, and Dante, he could be one of the better big men in the country this season. He's still developing. I still think he has a bit of a ceiling left to his game. Cambridge from Arizona State, Zarzuela, if he can translate to the Pac-12 at all, not really banking on it necessarily, but good depth piece. They lacked guard depth a lot last season. That really crushed them. Matt, I'm kind of buying Oregon. I got to say, I buy them every year. but I'm buying him again.
Okay. The guard stability thing has been, that's the hang up with me. Like you look back at, basically all of, Altman's great teams, and he's had many. There's always been at least like a game breaking guard that can at least balance the fortress of trees he has up front, which has really been like the key to his success, right? Like the defensive zone, the length, the way they protect the rim. But yeah, I don't like the guards coming back. That was kind of my question with them last year, and the guards returning. Bartholomew, Kusnard, and maybe we'll see if Jim's boy, the rookie Shellstad's legit, but that's my concern with this team.
I'm going to board bet so hard that Matt will love Shellstad. Will absolutely adore him.
All right.
I don't know if he's like the game breaker that raises the ceiling next year, but he's really good. We'll play a lot and you'll be like, oh, I like this guy.
All right. I'm going to write his name down in the notepad. Thank you, Jim. I mean, he's their fourth best freshman at like number 32 overall. So worth mentioning that Dana Altman still is recruiting top-notch talent. Helps when you have Phil Knight and the Nike machine in your back pocket.
I think he'll be their best freshman next year. I think so. Okay. Those other two are like very, very pro prospecty, toolsy type stuff. Shellstad's closer to like immediate impact.
Yeah, they already have Dante and Biddle, who was like kind of good finally down the stretch. Yeah, they could be a rim dominating machine. All right, we stay up in the Pac Northwest, Kai. Washington State, the home of data rate under Kyle Smith, which is basically been a team that's been far better than their win-loss record has indicated the last couple of years. But injuries and just a kind of an inability to close out close games has sort of masked how good I think this program is under Kyle Smith. It's just unfortunate the win-losses haven't quite mirrored, I think, the work that Smith's done holistically. That's my general prognostication going backwards.
Yeah, he's a great coach. He overachieves. Washington State's a tough place to win at. Unfortunately, overachieving doesn't mean you're a fantastic team. Doesn't mean you're in a tournament team every single year. And, I guess Matt was pretty high on them last year as usual. But we had some skepticism going into the last season. Jim and I had questions on their defense being that good, as good as Kyle Smith's teams in the past. It was a bit of a letdown last year. Going forward, I do love Kyle Smith, but unfortunately, I just think it's the same old Jim that we've seen the last couple of years. He feels like he's kind of building his own zone there, like infield.
Yeah, I wish they could win close games. I don't get it.
I know. Yeah.
Last 2 years per Ken Palm's luck, 337th and 338th, which again can be luck, but it also can be late game execution. Some of the having a dynamic ball handler creator, which they clearly lacked last year. Matt, your boy Justin Powell was super efficient. We had a big debate about him on the preseason pod, but he didn't emerge into that playmaker that they kind of needed from him. And that was just kind of missing all year. Rodman tried, but that's not really Rodman and Bamba, but that's just not their games fully.
Yeah. On paper, Powell was like pretty dang efficient, but I'm with you. The eye test didn't back it up to me. Like he just looked very hesitant and not as confident. And he didn't really, put pressure
really
on the defense.
Usage.
Yeah, he was just kind of a guy. And this team needs a guy to be a guy on the perimeter because they don't really have a lot of like threats. It's a lot of like kind of deferral first guys. They really leaned on Mogi at the rim, and then they kind of lost him late. And so I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Can Yesufu be that guy?
Yesufu, I like Yesufu. Kai, we like Yesufu. We like Yesufu in the Pac-12. Yeah, he can play at the Pac-12 for sure. He was good at Drake.
Yeah, I think he's awesome. I don't think it's an indictment they didn't play at Kansas. I agree.
Kansas is Kansas. I agree.
Yeah.
And
this team's not better. I don't know. It's not better than last year, or I don't know, on paper.
Yeah, losing Gay and Powell early unexpectedly. I mean, if you brought those two back and put them on this roster, suddenly, whoa, it looks great. But now it's just kind of like treading water, moving in place.
Yep. Unfortunate, because your margin for error at Washington State is very, very thin. All right, moving ahead, heading back down to the desert, Arizona State, the Bubble Boys, Bobby Hurley, yet again, rinse, wash, repeat, the playing game, Maestro. Yeah, I mean, speaking of like, you could kind of call a Hurley zone is starting to emerge as well, except the zone is really volatile throughout the year. It's like you're trading a future on the market, and then all of a sudden you kind of land at the same value price every season. Jim, thoughts on Hurley is sort of, looking back at how he changed the identity of his team, more defensive minded last season, which paid dividends, but still couldn't quite maintain any sort of consistency down the stretch.
Yeah, 2 straight top 35 defenses, 3 of the last 4 inside the top 50. Like they've kind of figured out that end. I think Warren Washington is going to be a delight for Grant McCaslin and Texas Tech. He is like a one-man cheat code to a great interior defense. I will give Hurley the nod there that he's starting to figure that out. I just do think sometimes the shot selection gets so crazy on the offensive end. Part of that was the Cambridges, but it's really been kind of a year-over-year thing. Probably not going to go away next year. Just going to continue being where they were, Kai. I don't really see a whole lot of like crazy upside. He gets enough talent to prevent downside. The Marvin Bagley thing's just like the weirdest shrug.
Marcus. Yeah. Or is it?
Yeah. Marcus.
Yeah.
You're right. Yep.
Yeah. Whatever. I thought he was going to be a major impact player last year. I think most of us did. He wasn't. He played 2 games. Good that he's out of the program, most likely. He seemed to be some sort of locker room cancer. I think this team's worse than last year. I don't expect them to make the tournament. I don't like the guys they brought in, really. Adam Miller, you haven't done anything. Kamari Lands, whatever. Tulsa, the Sela Bengu, I can't pronounce his name from Tulsa. Good player. Good player last year. I'm not sure he can anchor a defense like Warren Washington could. And losing the Cambridges is huge in my opinion. And Horn, it's a much worse roster.
Yeah, let's remember how bad Tulsa was. They were the worst
horrible
ATS team in the country, 5-27 or something overall. I'm a little concerned. Miller needs a waiver for a second time transfer, so we don't even know if he's going to play. It looks a little shaky next year.
I agree. I do think it's a team that maybe will overachieve a really low bar. Like they're probably going to be worse next year, but I think people are going to think they're going to stink. And to Hurley's credit, like his teams play hard and they're not always the smartest, but they do compete. And I think he's gotten enough talent in there to raise like the general, mean of that program. I mean, here's his KenPom finishes 2018, 50, 57, 63, 86, 97, which was COVID. And then the year after COVID and the last year back to 55. So like, I don't know, 4 to 6 years have been pretty solid by ASU standards. As frustrating as the in-season roller coaster rides have been.
Yeah,
that's probably what fans are.
Bartorvik's early ranks have them 82nd, Matt. I think finishing 55th to 60th is totally reasonable for them.
I agree. Yep. To the mountains we go. And yes, a team that I will most certainly be buying all of the stock on. The Utah Utes and my boy Craig Smith.
Bye.
Kai, give the fans a more earnest assessment of what happened last year in Sac Lake City, as they say on the football gridiron.
I'll give you guys a little credit. I got lucky, I think, winning my board bet. The board bet was top 70.
What a collapse.
I said they'd finish outside the top 70. You guys said inside. They were probably a top 70 team the entire year, except for the end. But too bad, man. Them's the breaks. He just hasn't put together Craig Smith, a fantastic coach, fantastic guy, has been on the program. He just hasn't put together a Pac-12 caliber roster. We know he's a great coach. We know he usually can overachieve. Last year was not an overachievement. This year, it's kind of more of the same. A lot of the same guys are coming back. You add Davon Smith from Georgia Tech, a guy I think is a pretty good player. But that's really it. I don't think he did enough, Jim, in the portal to convince me this is a tournament team now. I think it's going to be same old, maybe slight improvement.
Yeah, I kind of pick up what you're saying, Kai. They just don't have the athleticism jolt and like dynamism from the perimeter. Maybe Davon Smith adds that, but like Worcester is really, really solid as a guard, but he's not like hyper create his own shot type of guy. It's just like you said, he's going to maintain a really high floor, but the talent level hasn't been high enough to actually elevate the program yet.
Yeah, I mean, the loss of Marco Anthony is going to be huge. And when Gabe Mattson went out last season, that was a huge gut punch. It's the same theme with Rutgers we talked about. These schools that are kind of in the middle, the margin for error with 1 or 2 key injuries just can drop your season off a cliff. Now, I think it's partially on the coach, roster construction to build some more depth, develop some more depth to where if you lose a key guy or two, the bottom doesn't fall out. But I think it's just kind of the nature of the beast. If you're trying to put yourself in top 20 range at a school like Utah, right, or a school like Rutgers, it's just you need all your guys to really be intact, nothing to go all the way right. So I think that Mattson thing really torpedoed the end of their season.
Matt, what do you think about Craig Smith underperforming his preseason KenPom rank 2 years in a row?
Yeah, I think last year was objectively a disappointment. Even they had a ton of injuries last year too. But I think last season he actually overachieved despite the last season meltdown.
You mean 2 years ago was a disappointment? And
I think last year was, I give a better I give an excuse for last year more than I do 2 years ago.
Oh, 2 years ago was when Carlson
Was out too,
and he had COVID. Yeah, like they've had key stuff, but every team does. Like you said, you've got to be able to build behind that so that you lose one or two guys and it doesn't submarine you. And unfortunately, they haven't been able to secure that depth. And Kai, I don't think they have it next year really either.
No.
Yeah, it's the roster's thin again, but it's a good roster.
Sucks. No offense, Pac-12 peeps out there, but it's not good.
Again, the money spent.
Utah's the one that put you over the top. Yeah, wait till we get further
every
down
team
the
we're
list
talking
here.
about, I'm like, this team's not good. Like this, no one's
They had
good.
2 teams in the top 45 last year. That was it. It's super top heavy.
Yeah, they're getting lapped in the transfer portal. They're not right. There's not a ton of. They can't compete in the NIL world. They just don't. The alumni donors don't care enough. That's my take. All right, let's move to Washington. This is the team I probably know the absolute least about. And I want to echo what I said last podcast. I think we talked about Kenyon Merrifield, like just never on my radar. And it's gotten to a point where we thought they'd be so bad because they were so embarrassingly bad 2 years ago that like I found myself saying, oh, Washington's actually kind of good. And it's like, well, they're not really that good. Like the bar of Washington, the norm has been really sunk under Hopkins. He keeps trying to kind of scrap together these decently talented guys, throw it together, see what sticks. Nothing ever sticks. There's no semblance of continuity with this team the last 2-3 years. Kai, thoughts on the Huskies?
3 straight seasons finishing outside the top 100. Hopkins has had talent. He has consistently underperformed that talent. On paper last year, Goodman ranked him 6th in the Almanac preseason. And on paper, you could say that's a pretty reasonable ranking. But the coaching matters, and he hasn't been able to put it together yet. I don't see any reason why this team improves this season. I think they got worse. Severe Wheeler is now the leader of their program here, and it's a similar transfer, Jim, to what we've seen in the past from Washington. Getting the point guard in who we don't really trust, Lashon Williams,
back,
Quade Green. It's that type of guy. He just keeps going back to the same well.
Yeah, they haven't finished. I said this on the preseason pod, inside the top 110 on offense with Hopkins in charge in 6 years. 165th this year. No one made threes against them last year, like top 15 rate in terms of 3-point defense, and they were still only 75th defensively. He said, like you said, Kai, 3 straight years outside the top 100. In 2021, they went 5-21. And then the next year they went 17-15. So win-loss made it seem like they had made a bunch of progress, but there really wasn't under the hood. And last year it just stayed in that neutral status, 500, middle of the road towards the bottom Pac-12 team. It's going to be that, Matt, while he's there, I think. And I don't know how long that'll be.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking back at like Washington basketball history. Man, Lorenzo Romar, a guy we throw plenty of shade, and he's not
had
like
a pretty good run.
I mean, relative to the predecessors and the successors, yeah, he had it going. I mean, obviously, when you're getting that kind of talent,
he had a run in early 2000s, but his last
it was a while ago. It was
bad.
a while ago. It was very much buried in the front end of that regime. But
yeah, so Washington's made a tournament once in the past 12 years. Yikes.
It's historically not a big program. It really isn't. Like it's one of, I think, on the lower half of the Pac-12 spectrum. I think we kind of look at it as maybe a better name brand than it is in basketball.
Seattle.
I know. I don't get why it's not better.
Pretty good talent city.
Yeah, it is.
NBA players out of that city. I don't know, man.
The gym actually has kind of high school gym vibes. I love how like they're on top of you with the old bleachers, but it does sort of remind you that this program is not like, investing bajillions of dollars into their success.
I wouldn't mind going to coach there, live in Seattle.
I agree.
Being at Washington, I mean,
great color scheme, purple, gold, Huskies. Like I love all that.
You don't think Kyle Smith would take this job in a heartbeat? Oh man, hire Kyle Smith. Hopkins has to go. He has to go.
The problem with Kyle Smith is that he can't sell himself as a good coach because he actually hasn't won a high number of games the last couple of years. Like unless you have like a really nerdy like GM or ADs, like, oh, I get it. You're So. All right, we're going to Colorado, which has been the butt of Pac-12 Twitter jokes the last couple of months.
Has it?
This is they've been sort of the black sheep, I think, with the whole realignment stuff and where they're going to go, and they're kind of messing up with the plans to keep that thing together, at least what's left of it.
Plus all the Coach Prime stuff and running out every single player that was returning, like ridiculous.
I kind of support him, honestly.
Yeah,
got it.
It's a bad team. Yeah. Anyways.
We'll have more power of football talk later. But in terms of on the floor, yeah, this is kind of back to the old Boyle ball. At least last year, it sort of was where you kind of feel like there's this inherent ceiling. Now Boyle's broken through that recently. I think he's actually recruiting much better, and I think the general talent pool he's bringing in has actually risen. But this still kind of feels like an inherent cap to how good this team can be, Jim. I know I'm going to be the token seller on Colorado this season, despite a lot of people thinking they're going to be really good, like top 25 good.
What's this quote from you on the preseason episode? I think was perfect. If the roster doesn't excite you, they'll probably be a little better than you think. That was this last year. People ranked them like 9th or 10th. They kind of finished 7th, 8th, a little bit feisty against the spread. And then to continue your quote, if it really excites you, I don't know if they're going to set the world on fire. And that seems like it could be prophetic for next year, where everyone's getting all excited. Your boy De Silva's back. They're bringing in Williams, the 5-star. They got KJ Simpson back. I just don't think that leaps them into top 20. They will probably finish like 5th or 6th in the Pac-12. I don't think it's quite kind of the McKinley Wright team that broke into like top 15 Ken Pom.
KJ Simpson isn't that great, folks. He's not that great.
I think he's good. I think he's good. I know he wasn't that efficient. I like
McKinley
him.
Wright. He and McKinley Wright.
Shout out Field of 68, Field of 68 Daily. They compiled some early top 25s here. So the Daily, Stadium, aka Jeff Goodman, ESPN, and T-Rank, Bart Torvik, all have Colorado as top 25 teams. And I know there's potential here. I know Cody Williams, 5-star top 10 guy. Simpson, okay. Lampkin, De Silva. There's some pieces here. Tad Boyle has finished in the top 25 of Ken Pom once in 13 seasons. That goes to top 35 as well. It was that McKinley Wright team that finished top 10. He just doesn't have that ceiling. I mean, he's made it there before, but it's not a consistent one, and this team isn't good enough to reach that, Matt. So I think 50 is more reasonable. Maybe they break that 40, something like that.
Yeah, you can make a case for upside next year, but we don't have to go down to the next season.
They have upside, sure.
Hammond and Ruffin and O'Brien, I'm sure the Buff fans think they're going to be studs, and they think Simpson's still McKinley Wright 2.0. I just don't see it. I watched him play a couple of times. I didn't like what I saw.
He wins between 18 and 23 games every year.
Solid. Teams play hard. Teams play hard again. If the roster is bad, they're going to compete and they're going to defend and rebound. I think they execute pretty well typically as well. So, all right, Stanford, the tree.
Yuck.
Big tree fell hard last season. Mr. McKeon, where do you want to begin? I think I'm actually probably the nicest toward Mr. Haas of the three of us. So I'll kick it to Kai for some scorching hot takes on Stanford and what went wrong last season and how right we were.
No, I embarrassingly believed in this team last year. Listening back at the podcast, Goodman had him 5th. I agreed with that. I was offended that he put Spencer Jones above Harrison Ingram on the all-conference team. Guess what? That happened. So I was dead wrong on that. And Ingram really wasn't that great of a player last year. Man, the roster once again, like I like Michael Jones. I like Spencer Jones. Angel's not a bad player. Renault is pretty good up front, but I know this team's going to underachieve. I cannot believe Jared Haas still has a job. Jared Bynum doesn't really move the needle much for me. It's going to be the same old Jim that we've seen every single season. And once again, we'll be asking, is Stanford going to let Haas go this year?
Yeah, Bynum's helpful because their point guard situation was a black hole for a couple of years. Like
Dejan Davis.
Silva was supposed to be the real helpful boost last year. It was horrific. Mike O'Connell was a game manager that threw a lot of interceptions, basically. Like he's not even good at the game management part of being a game manager. And Ingram, like you said, didn't make the all-conference team despite being elevated into more of a playmaker role. Just can't shoot. It was miscast. This team is maddening to watch. They do just silly things constantly on both ends of the floor, like bad fouls, bad shots, bad turnovers. I think that continues. They will continue to be lower than their talent level would indicate, although it will help to have an actual competent point guard in the system.
This team was top 35 offensively last year.
Right, Kai. This is my point. It makes no sense. This team should have been good defensively. They weren't.
Yeah.
How they were good on offense is a miracle. They actually they kicked the ball in the stands half the times. They don't really look organized. They shot it really well. They have some good shooting.
Wow.
But like the Spencer Jones 3 and D, it's like, okay. I mean, I think as an individual defender, he's probably pretty good, but Michael Jones, right? Angel, no D as a unit, no defense. And again, I think having a guy like Bynum, who is an upgrade on both offense and defense over O'Connell and Silva, I mean, Bynum could be an absolute game changer for this entire, what's been a disaster. Maybe he's like the breath of fresh air, the adult in the room they need. I don't know. It comes from Providence, Cooley winning program, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, that's been the whole Stanford thing the last couple of years. Just the same kind of guys that, I don't know, don't feel like they're ultra competitive, to be blunt.
They're super old this year. They have a ton of experience, and they have Peja's kid, Stokovich, coming to town. Maybe he's amazing right away. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not quite Kendrick Davis stabilizing Memphis. Like Bynum's not that good, and Stanford hasn't been as erratic as Memphis, but like the point guard that actually plays point guard coming in it could be
the
big swing for them.
Yeah. And we continue cruising down the line, and man, the talent is about to get real bleak here, folks. But this next team, shouts to the Peyton Head, shouts to my favorite Pac-12 organization, that's Oregon State. Hey, they were better than Cal last year, so beat your chest about that, Mr. Beavers. Jimbo, I think the theme last year was just play the young guys, see what they got, try and develop something for the long term, see if you can bring some momentum back into this season, then get a couple of transfers and see where you're at. But man, just to be a, kind of a AAA, AA farm system for some of these bigger schools, especially when, I think Teal's actually done a pretty good job developing these like higher end 3-star, lower end 4-star guys, but you just can't keep them and you can't build any momentum with, I know, the homegrown way in which he wants to do it there.
He did keep all 3 of his best freshmen. So tip of the cap to that, especially Pope coming back is big time. Those guys did not fly the coop to the portal. Last year, I think, was what we expected and what it needed to be. Like, get those guys, cut their teeth a little bit in the Pac-12, play the young guys, go through the lumps. But as you said, Matt, you wanted to fill in some of the margins with transfers, and they haven't added a single name in the portal this year. That's maybe where I'm more concerned and is going to delay the progress. Kai, you kind of nailed it. Quote from the preseason podcast. Like, there's not a lot to get excited about. Not a top 200 team. They finished 214th. Matt, you said you had been on Peyton Heads in the preseason. They wanted to see progress this coming year, 23-24. That's when they started to see the needle. We portrayed this as like very much a process build program, like a mid-major rather than a high major that reloads. And so they need to start that upswing with some of these sophomores to be.
Getting nothing in the portal this year is just like, man, you can't do that in the transfer portal day and age. I know he's developing guys, and maybe they crack top 200 this year, because I really do like Jordan Pope. And I watched that game against Duke. They almost beat Duke in Portland. They just like kind of mucked it up, but I just don't think they can stay. They can do that consistently. It's still a very young team. 200 is probably about right.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I was like Glenn Taylor's that was kind of a tough loss. Like, I thought you bring him back with that younger nucleus, and you kind of have him and Pope there leading the charge. A healthy Christian Wright. O'Connell's got a little bit of ups. Like, if I'm Tinkle, I can see how Tinkle looks at the roster and says, I like what I have, but I'm telling you, you need a little more. It's just a lot of. You're just banking on a lot of like 3-star caliber talent to really make a big bump in a power conference league. But I mean, Tinkle's a guy who does more with less when he has healthy players. And I believe he can do that again this year. I love Jordan Pope. I know we heard rumors he was considering leaving, which would have been an absolute devastating blow to this team and like any momentum or optimism of hope for this next year. But yeah, him staying is just an absolute, I mean, he's a fringe first teamer for me. I guess they won't be good enough to be a first team. He's a second team all conference guy this year. No question.
He can be first team when they have 10 on the first team.
Yeah.
I'll give it
yeah, that's right. That's okay. The Pac-12 is weird. Stay weird, Pac-12. And then California, Berkeley. Boy. Yeah, I mean, I know we're supposed to talk about look backwards to what happened last year in the Mark Fox era, in the wake of the very esteemed Viking Jones era. Jim, just quickly highlight anything or pour gasoline on the fire, I guess, before we speak gushously. That's not a word it is now, about Mr. Mark Madsen coming to town.
Yeah, I don't want to say the word highlight and talk about last year's Cal in the same sentence. That there just weren't any. It was a disaster by pretty much all measures, even by like Viking Jones proportions. Last year was a disaster. Too much Devin Askew, though he only played 13 games, they were just not competitive with him on the floor. Continued to be that way without him. But
they started off 2-3 in the league. He missed those
Yeah.
games. Like, oh, Cal, I thought Devin Askew was kind of good. And then he was still out, and then they just weren't any good.
They didn't win another game after that. Kai, you and I both used the word bleak on the preseason podcast, and it certainly felt that way. I just don't understand why Stanford and Washington didn't want to inject the same enthusiasm and optimism that Cal did by moving on and hiring a new name, Kai, because like Matt said, Madsen has given this program some real juice now.
Stanford, you could have had Mark Madsen. You could have had. And when Stanford is looking up at Cal in the Pac-12 standings this year, and you see the Cal Bears finishing top 5 in this league, they're going to be shaking their heads because this roster all of a sudden looks good. I took him 100,000 to 1 to win the tournament, to win the championship. Why not? Mark Madsen isn't
1,000 to 1, I think.
100,000 to 1.
No, I don't believe that's correct. $10 to win $1 million.
What do I have?
10,000 to 1. 100,000 to $20 to win 20,000 is what I
1,000 to 1.
1,000 to 1.
1,000 to 1.
1,000 to 1. 100 million to 1.
I like that.
10 million to 1.
How'd he get in?
You guys think Leicester City was an underdog story? The Golden Bears.
I put $20 on it, so like whatever. I'll take $20,000. Mark Madsen is a huge upgrade. Jalen Cone, Meadows from Portland, Tyson, Amac, County Kennedy. I'm in. Tournament team. Staking my flag.
That's what I was to say. We're hyping up this preseason future. Where do you actually see them, Kyle? Like top 45 team?
Yeah,
that's
maybe
too high.
I would say I think this team's top. Boy, they could finish top 50. Is how I will caveat that.
Yeah.
I think they'll be top. I mean, they probably have to be tournament team. Otherwise, you got to win a bunch of close games and get lucky.
Right.
I mean, Konzo had this team. He finished 28th. Was his best year. He was 62nd.
Yeah, I just think Kwanzo's formula and Madsen's are just so different. Like, it's tough to make that. I see it's like the program has been good enough, but that's just two different beasts.
They were good in the Montgomery days. I mean,
Montgomery has got talent too. Yeah.
Last time they had a Stanford guy.
Who was that guard I loved?
Jerome Randall.
Jerome Randall, baby. I thought he was Stanford. I thought it was Stanford.
No, he was Cal. Randall was definitely Cal.
Randall's Cal. Okay. Who's the Stanford had a fun guard too? I liked who crushes TBT. I'm gonna blank on his name now too. Anyway, all that aside, final thoughts on Pac-12.
It's a worse league than last year, which
it's the same sad song. It's just I don't think a lot of you're seeing both with the lack of NIL investment in the transfer portal and with the refusal to pay out some of these buyouts for coaches that probably should be fired. That's the key. Jim mentioned with Washington. Just some cheap themes that you get from this conference. Kind of a bummer.
Yeah, like Kai said, it's worse because the deterioration at the top and then the middle isn't any better, more exciting. Like, yeah, it's good that Cal is going to be competent and maybe you don't have two teams outside the top 200, but I also don't think they'll have two in the top 15. So it's just kind of going to be more of middling and teams kind of fighting to get enough wins in the Pac-12 to look like they're a tourney-worthy team.
It's why the Mark Madsen hire is so important. Like, you have to get a coaching hire right when you're in the Pac-12 or Mountain West or American Conference. Like in the SEC, you get one wrong, you fire them 2 years, you get money out, you'll spend whatever, donors will spend whatever, but you have to get it right in the Pac-12. You can't afford to set your program back a decade, and that's kind of what some of these teams have done. Hey, Pac-12 fun. Tune in. Pac-12 After Dark should be a great conference next season. This is the three-man weave breaking it all down. Matthew Cox, Kai McKeon, and Jim Roots back same time next week, dissecting which
final
league?
Recap. SEC, a conference that cares perhaps too much about sports. No, of course not. It's not possible. It means more, man.
It means more down there, down in your neck of the woods in Columbia, Missouri, SEC country, of course. Until that time, take care. Thank you for joining us today, folks.
10 million to 1.